Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a monumental stack of sources and distill them into the essential knowledge you need to be informed. Today, we are undertaking a truly comprehensive deep dive into one extraordinary source. The memoir, Where Are We Going? A Father's Journey Through Mosaic Down Syndrome. This book is, well, it's more than just a personal story. It is a 57-year chronicle of love, relentless struggle, and institutional advocacy, tracing the life of the author's son, Brent.
Right, and an incredible span of time.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to follow that journey with exhaustive detail, covering every chapter, every crushing medical prediction, every surprising moment of joy, and, every painful systemic failure. We really want to go beyond a summary here.
Yeah, capture the full weight of it.
Exactly. The full weight of this family's odyssey. Okay, let's unpack this.
I think what's essential to recognize right off the bat is the historical value embedded within this personal account. It's not just one family's story.
No, it's broader.
It really serves as a lens into the history of care, or maybe more accurately, the failure of care sometimes, for the developmentally disabled in America. We're talking specifically from the early 1960s right through to the 21st century.
That's a huge sweep of history.
It is. And by exploring Brent's life, you're really looking at how medicine reacted, often, frankly, incorrectly, to a condition like Mosaic Down Syndrome that was just poorly understood back then.
And navigating the emotional toll that comes with all that. Exactly.
The profound emotional consequences this level of care, or lack thereof, demands from a family.
That really is the core of the experience, isn't it? The memoir is organized into 11 detailed chapters, and it starts, as you'd expect, with those incredibly difficult early years. Diagnosis, defying medical expectations. Let's start there with Part 1, Chapters 1 through 3, the crushing beginnings and that unexpected resilience.
Right. Chapter 1, Beginnings and Diagnosis. It sets the scene. 1961, the father and his wife, Bonnie, they get married. Their son, Brent, is born January 6, 1963.
So, typical young couple starting a family.
Yeah, ready for the usual joys, But that joy was immediately complicated.
And complicated is putting it mildly. The complications were visible right away, weren't they?
Oh, definitely. Brent was born with a number of significant physical conditions.
Can you detail those for us?
Sure. He had an extra finger on each hand. Apparently one was fully developed, like with bone structure, and the other was just soft tissue.
Wow.
Plus, he had undescended tests, a hernia, and his head circumference was smaller than expected.
Yeah.
So these weren't just minor things you could ignore.
No, these sound like things needing immediate medical attention.
Precisely. It thrust the parents straight into this world of hospitals, specialists, surgeries, just uncertainty from day one.
And that led to surgery very early on.
Incredibly early. At only 2.5 months old, Brent had his first major surgery at Eden Hospital in Castro Valley, California.
2.5 months. What did they do?
It was critical stuff. They removed both extra fingers and they repaired the hernia. You have to imagine being first-time parents navigating that with a baby who's barely weeks old.
Just overwhelming. And what's striking, reading the account, is that even with all this, there wasn't a clear diagnosis for years.
That's right. The diagnosis. Well, it finally arrived in 1965. Brent was 2 years old by then.
And what was it?
The specialists settled on Mosaic Down Syndrome. But here's the thing, even when they gave the diagnosis, they apparently expressed hesitation. They admitted it was, and this is a quote, only the closest they could come up with.
So still uncertainty, even with a name for it.
Absolutely. And we need to understand the context here. Down syndrome itself has variability, right? But Mosaic Down syndrome involves a mix of cell lines. Some cells have the extra chromosome 21, others are typical.
Which means the effects can be really different from person to person.
Exactly. Highly varied presentations. This makes diagnosis harder, and predicting the outcome? Well, it's unreliable, especially back in the 60s when it was considered rare and wasn't well understood at all.
And that lack of understanding, that uncertainty, it seems like it allowed medical fear to really take over.
It did. And those fears were distilled into what the father describes as just a truly crushing prognosis. The specialists basically laid out a grim future.
What did they predict? It sounds awful.
It was. They told the parents Brent would likely not walk until his 20s.
His 20s?
Yeah. That he would never speak, never learn to write. They even warned that due to failed brain development, the front of his skull would eventually cave in.
Oh, my goodness.
And then the final blow, he probably wouldn't live past his mid-20s. Imagine hearing all of that when your son is just 2 years old.
It's almost impossible to comprehend receiving that news. But the story doesn't end there, does it?
Not even close. And this is what's so fascinating about Brent's spirit, maybe the human spirit in general. He immediately started defying those predictions. He just refused to follow their chart.
How so?
Well, first off, he walked at 2.5 years old, not 20 years old.
Wow, okay. Huge difference.
Huge. He learned to form words. He eventually learned to write his entire name, Brent, in these big, determined block letters.
And the skull deformity.
Never happened, just never materialized. And maybe most powerfully, he lived to age 57. He passed away on August 28, 2019.
57. That's more than double the prediction.
Way more. This massive gap between the medical prediction and the lived reality. That's really the central thread running through this entire book.
That resilience must have given them some hope, but it didn't make the day-to-day any easier, I imagine. Chapter 2 talks about the early struggles and how the family expanded. The father uses the word chaos.
Relentless chaos, yeah. The initial years, he writes, were the hardest. A lot of it stemmed from constant, sharp crying.
Not just normal baby crying.
No, this was different. It seemed tied to real physical discomfort, maybe from the earlier hernia issues, plus he had chronic feeding problems. They described nights just blurring into days, survival mode, basically.
Keep getting through it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And trying to have any semblance of normalcy was, well, almost impossible.
There's that story about the vacation attempt, right?
Ah, yes, the infamous failed vacation to Santa Cruz in 1964. They ended up spending the whole time just driving around aimlessly.
Why?
Trying to feed Brent, trying to settle him down in the car. It was a harsh realization that their life just wasn't going to fit into standard routines or allow for spontaneous breaks.
That sounds incredibly isolating.
It must have been.
Yeah.
And it was during this period of really extreme strain that they got some advice from a doctor. Overwhelming advice, the father calls it.
What's the advice?
Have another child.
Seriously.
That
While dealing with all this.
Yeah. The reasoning was that Brent's specific condition, Mosaic Down Syndrome, was thought to be so rare it was extremely unlikely to happen again. So another child could help restore some kind of balance to the family unit. Reduce the isolation, maybe?
Did they follow that advice?
They did.
Yeah.
It clearly resonated with their feeling of being overwhelmed and, cut off. That decision led to the family growing.
Right, the siblings. Brian was born in 64.
Yes, Brian in 1964, then Troy in 1970, and finally Victoria in 1974. And the siblings did provide a critical sense of, quote, normalcy.
How so?
Suddenly there were birthday parties again, family games, the typical sibling interactions. It helped create a buffer against the constant focus on Brent's needs and the chaos he sometimes brought.
But as Brent got older, the challenges didn't disappear, they just changed.
Exactly. Puberty, in particular, brought a new set of difficulties, an escalation in violence, actually.
Violence? That sounds serious.
It was. The memoir vividly describes outbursts that became more unpredictable and, frankly, dangerous as he got physically bigger and stronger.
Like what kind of incidents?
Well, the father recounts having to replace the front window of their house 3 separate times because Brent broke it during outbursts.
3 times.
Yeah. He eventually had to install shatterproof safety glass. It was about ensuring the physical safety of Bonnie, the other kids, himself.
And the sleep situation. That
Or-
sounds like a constant battle, too.
Oh, immense. A consistent, grinding toll, often stretching for weeks at a time. The description of the nightly routine is just visceral.
What do they have to do?
Sometimes Bonnie would just lie with him for hours, trying to soothe him. Other times, the father describes having to physically hold him down in bed.
Hold him down.
Sometimes literally laying his leg across Brent's body, just to ensure everyone, including Brent, got maybe a few hours of forced rest. Imagine that level of constant physical and emotional vigilance night after night.
Relentless is the right word. Yet, amidst all this struggle, Chapter 3 dives into some really unique aspects of Brent's personality. His memory, his sensitivity.
Yes, Brent's memory, sensitivity, and traits. It shows he wasn't just defined by his challenges. Despite the cognitive hurdles, his memory was apparently truly remarkable.
In what way? Like remembering people?
Way beyond just recognizing faces. The book details his ability to recall incredibly specific things. Like, he could remember the exact color and model of a visitor's car months after only seeing it parked outside briefly.
That's unusual.
Very. And he never, ever forgot his favorite bus driver, a woman named Betty. That connection stayed with him.
It sounds like more than just rote memorization.
The father thinks so, too. He calls it a heightened awareness. There's this surprising story where a friend got a new car. Before the father could even mention it, Brent apparently knew the new color and model.
How?
The father suggests Brent had this almost hyper-focus on patterns and noticing deviations from routine, he picked up on minute details that most people would just overlook.
And the sensitivity extended to emotions too, right?
Deeply. He was profoundly attuned to the family's emotional atmosphere, like a barometer.
So he could sense tension.
Instantly. If his parents were arguing, even if it was just a quiet, tense exchange, he knew. If one of the siblings was upset or distressed, Brent picked up on it immediately.
How would he react?
Often disproportionately strongly. He'd react with crying or this intense, agitated pacing around the house. It was like he absorbed the emotional tension and amplified it. His internal gauge was accurate, but he couldn't really process or moderate what he was feeling. He just mirrored the family's stress.
That must have been incredibly difficult for everyone.
Adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it? And this brings us to that phrase, the one that became the title of the book.
Where are we going?
Exactly. He would ask it with this palpable urgency, mostly in the car, whenever the route changed even slightly from the expected path.
Capturing his anxiety about change, his need for predictability.
Perfectly. That question, repeated constantly over decades, it became a family trademark. But more than that, it just perfectly symbolized the constant uncertainty, the instability that defined not just his journey, but the journey of his entire family.
Which leads us into part 2, where the family really had to restructure their lives and start confronting the care system, chapters 4 through 7.
Right. That constant need for stability Brent had, it forced a complete overhaul of their lives. Chapter 4, Shaping the Family's Path, really highlights this. Bonnie's role, his mother's role, was absolutely foundational.
Described as relentless, exhausting care.
Yeah, she bore just an immense emotional weight as the primary caregiver. But she found an outlet, didn't she?
Yes, sewing. The memoir emphasizes this wasn't just a hobby. It was a necessary refuge.
Right, something separate and controllable.
Exactly. It provided both some income and, crucially, some emotional space away from the constant demands of caregiving.
Meanwhile, the dynamic with the siblings, Brian, Troy, and Victoria, it evolved into what the father calls a double-edged sword, meaning they grew up witnessing constant chaos, yelling immense parental sacrifice. Their own needs often had to come second because Brent's needs were so urgent and immediate.
That sounds incredibly tough on them.
It was, but the other edge of the sword, the upside, if you can call it that, was the profound moral grounding it gave them. They learned deep lessons in empathy, patience, resilience, compassion, things that irrevocably shaped who they became as adults. The weight was heavy, no doubt, but the strength they gained was undeniable.
And the pressure affected the father's career path too, didn't it?
Yeah.
He had to make changes.
Big changes. He initially had his path set out in the optical industry, his trained field. He was even working 2 jobs at one point to make ends meet.
But the financial strain and the need for stability forced a shift.
Completely. And the way the shift happened is kind of remarkable. It was through a chance encounter.
What happened?
Bonnie was talking to another mother at Brent's special school in Danville, California. This mother mentioned that a company called Peterson Tractor was hiring.
Okay.
So the father applied, kind of on a whim, got the job. And that job instantly provided the financial stability they desperately needed. It allowed him to quit the second job.
And he credits Brent for that.
Indirectly, yes. He acknowledges that this chance connection, stemming from Brent's schooling needs, basically redirected his entire career path and arguably saved their financial stability. It shows just how total the adaptation had to be.
Changing professions not for ambition, but purely for the family's practical needs.
Exactly. And they are very clear in the book. They wouldn't have survived without the support system they had. All 4 grandparents were involved, plus close friends. They provided essential relief, moments for Bonnie and the father to just breathe.
Even with that help, the strain on the marriage must have been immense.
Oh, absolutely. The father reiterates the stress, the yelling, the feeling that he and Bonnie were often operating less like a romantic couple and more like, well, survival partners is the term he uses.
Just focused on getting through the day.
Day by day, crisis by crisis. And this immense, relentless pressure eventually led them to a heartbreaking realization. They couldn't continue providing the care Brent needed at home anymore.
Which brings us to Chapter 5, Transition to Outside Care. This must have been an agonizing decision.
Devastating. This happened around the late 1970s when Brent was about 16. It was purely a choice born of necessity.
Why then?
His size, his physical strength, and the unpredictability of his behavioral needs. They had simply outgrown the family's capacity to manage him safely at home, especially with younger siblings in the house.
That must have been particularly hard for Bonnie.
The father says it was devastating for her, but ultimately it was the only sustainable path forward for everyone's safety and well-being.
And this decision coincided with changes in how California was handling care for the developmentally disabled.
Yes, it was a pivotal time. The state was actively moving away from large institutions, closing them down, and shifting towards smaller, community-based residential homes. For the family, this new model became their only option.
Did they find any stability in that system?
Well, they found one remarkable point of consistency: a dedicated social worker. This person apparently remained involved in Brent's life and care for over 40 years.
40 years. That's incredible continuity.
It really is, especially when you contrast it with the instability of the facilities themselves. Brent ended up being placed in about 10 different residential homes over the decades.
10 different places. Why so many moves?
Often due to issues within the facilities. Constant staff turnover was a huge problem. Inconsistent rules, lack of training, all things that would deeply unsettle someone like Brent, who thrived on routine.
Can you give an example of a facility failure?
There's a really vivid, frightening one from a placement in Hayward. The father got a frantic call at 1 a.m. Brent was out of control, the staff said.
Okay, so they needed help.
Well, by the time the father rushed over there, the staff admitted they hadn't been able to contain him. Worse, they had called the police.
The police?
Yeah.
For behavioral outbursts in a care facility.
Yes. The police ended up transporting Brent to Highland Hospital in Oakland, which was miles away and totally inappropriate for the situation.
What happened when the father got to the hospital?
He had to drive out there at 2:30 a.m., only to find Brent sitting calmly in the waiting room. Just calm. That whole incident, the staff's failure involving the police, the unnecessary hospital trip, it was completely unacceptable. It triggered an immediate push to find a safer, more competent placement.
It shows how vulnerable residents are when staff aren't properly trained or supported.
Absolutely. But even in better facilities, medical crises could still erupt. There was a severe incident with C. diff.
C. difficile, that's a nasty bacterial infection, highly contagious.
Extremely. Brent contracted it, and it was serious enough to require quarantine in a special unit back at Eden Hospital.
So strict isolation protocols.
Oh, yeah. Just to visit, the parents had to wear full protective gear gown, mask, shoe covers. The situation was severe enough that the county of Alameda had to monitor it.
Did he recover?
Thankfully, yes. He eventually recovered and was able to return to a place called MV Home, which the parents consistently praise as a truly exemplary facility, providing deserving care. But the C. diff incident just underscores the constant battle to keep him medically stable in environments where infections can spread so easily.
And that medical vulnerability is a major theme, isn't it? Chapter 6, Medical Trials and Tribulations, dives deeper into that, starting with a chronic issue that caused decades of pain.
Yes, a chronic constipation. This wasn't just occasional discomfort, it was a relentless, persistent struggle. For years, standard medications just didn't provide much relief.
Leading to a lot of suffering for him.
And frequent ER visits when it became severe. The breakthrough, the actual understanding of why this was happening, finally came during a colonoscopy.
What did they find?
Something astonishing, an anatomical anomaly. Brent's colon was 12 inches longer than normal.
12 inches. That's a foot longer than average.
Exactly. Think about what that means physiologically. Waste material has a much longer, slower journey through the bowel. It requires significantly more effort to pass.
So that's why he was in constant pain, and the usual meds didn't work.
Precisely. It wasn't behavioral, it wasn't dietary in the usual sense. It was a fundamental physical difference that was driving so much of his daily discomfort and agitation.
Finding that out must have been a huge revelation.
Huge. And the story of getting that colonoscopy is, well, it's something else.
What happened?
On the actual morning of the procedure, Brent loved his bubble baths, right? He slipped in the tub and hit his head hard on the faucet.
Oh, no. Is he okay?
He sustained a deep gash on his forehead. And this happened just about 40 minutes before they were due at the hospital, which was a 40-minute drive away.
Terrible timing. Did they still go?
They had to, but the father notes this bizarre side effect of the head injury.
What was that?
Despite the fresh wound, the shock or something seemed to make Brent unusually calm. He describes him as being calm, sweet, and cooperative through the entire colonoscopy procedure. a moment of really dark, strange humor amidst everything.
Just unbelievable. And the sheer number of medical visits over his lifetime.
It's staggering. The father estimates around 1,500 doctor and hospital visits total.
1,500.
Roughly. That includes everything: routine checkups, specialists, the frequent ER trips for severe constipation, infections, or sometimes just because caregivers panicked and didn't know what else to do.
And his anxiety and behavioral issues led to a lot of medication, right?
Yes, extensive psychiatric medication, what's often called polypharmacy, being on multiple drugs at once. At various points, he was prescribed up to 8 or more powerful medications simultaneously.
8 or more? Like what?
Sedatives, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, a whole cocktail.
Yeah.
And this is a major concern, in caring for people who can't easily verbalize how they feel or describe side effects.
Because behavior becomes the main thing doctors look at.
Exactly. And it can lead to this cycle where challenging behavior is met with more medication, which might cause side effects, leading to more challenging behavior, and so on. The memoir highlights the painful irony with Ativan, for example.
What happened with Ativan?
It's meant to be calming, a sedative, but for Brent, it had the opposite effect, a known paradoxical reaction. It made him intensely agitated and restless. Finding the right therapeutic balance, not just sedation, was this constant, terrifying tightrope walk.
Even getting basic preventative care sounds like it was a battle. The teeth cleaning story.
Oh, that one really stands out. The father recounts pleading for years just to get Brent a professional dental cleaning. He says, surprisingly, it was the single hardest appointment to secure.
Harder than specialist visits. Why?
It just highlights how preventative care, especially dental, often falls through the cracks in institutional settings. It's not seen as urgent, perhaps.
But they finally got it done.
They did. They found a determined dentist in San Francisco, a 45-mile drive away. But the appointment itself required extraordinary measures. Brent was understandably anxious, uncooperative. To actually get the cleaning done, the father had to physically sit on Brent's lap in the dental chair to hold and steady his head.
While the dentist worked.
Well, the dentist worked and nurses had to restrain Brent's hands. It's just this stark illustration that every single piece of basic, necessary care was earned through immense physical and emotional effort from the parents.
And the health complications didn't ease up later in life.
No, if anything, they compounded. Around age 50, his swallowing became unsafe. He couldn't eat normally anymore and required a feeding tube.
Which solves one problem, but potentially creates others.
Exactly. The feeding tube, while necessary for nutrition, introduced a whole new set of issues. Multiple infections related to the tube site, requiring repeated hospitalizations and long courses of antibiotics. His body was just under constant siege, yet somehow he kept going.
Which leads directly into the really difficult subject of Chapter 7, institutional failures and advocacy, where the system meant to protect him actually caused harm.
Yeah, this chapter is tough. It details the most severe betrayals of trust. The worst was the Fremont abuse incident.
What happened there?
The father was giving Brent a bath after a visit home from a facility in Fremont. He discovered horrific bruising, deep black and blue marks all over Brent's groin area, his legs, inner thighs, even his genitals.
Oh my God. That sounds intentional.
The location and severity were consistent, the father writes, with someone having repeatedly kneed and kicked him. Likely a staff member who lost patience and lashed out.
Was the person identified?
Yes, the staff member responsible was removed. But the incident, understandably, just shattered any remaining trust the parents had and solidified their need for constant vigilance.
And it wasn't always malicious abuse, sometimes it was negligence.
Catastrophic negligence. The near-fatal choking incident at a different home, this one in Oakland, it's terrifying.
What did he choke on?
A plastic sandwich bag that still contained half a sandwich.
A plastic bag? How does that even happen in a supervised setting?
Exactly. It proved that even the most basic level of supervision, ensuring someone doesn't ingest plastic, was failing. That incident nearly killed him and just reinforced the parents' role as the ultimate, tireless watchdogs for his safety.
The father connects these failures to broader systemic problems, right?
He does. He points directly at the constant staff turnover driven by poverty-level wages, the lack of standardized, certified training for people dealing with incredibly complex needs, the general unpreparedness of many caregivers.
But he also contrasts this with positive experiences.
Yes, very clearly.
Yeah.
He contrasts these systemic failures with the care Brent received at MV Home, which he describes as truly exemplary, professional, loving, competent. It proved to him that good care was possible.
So what was the difference there?
Adequate resources, strong leadership, compassionate staff who were properly trained and supported. That experience really galvanized the father's call for systemic reform. Standardized fair wages across the board, mandatory certified training programs, and much stronger oversight and real accountability for abuse and neglect.
It's a powerful call for change based on decades of lived experience.
Absolutely. And there's one more heartbreaking detail in this chapter, the observation about loneliness.
What did he notice?
During their regular visits to these various facilities, the father notes that he and Bonnie were often the only visitors there. Many other residents living in the same homes rarely, if ever, seemed to receive visits or comfort from family. It just speaks volumes about the isolating reality of life within the care system for so many vulnerable people.
Such a sad reality. Okay, let's transition now to part 3. The narrative shifts a bit here, focusing on joy, legacy, and ultimately the search for answers, chapters 8 through 11.
Right. Chapter 8, Humor, Sports, and Special Moments, is crucial because it shows that life wasn't only struggle. There were moments of light, connection, and even humor that break through.
Like the MRI story.
Oh, the MRI story is wonderful. Picture the scene. Tense medical setting, loud machine, Brent's supposed to be lying perfectly still, and suddenly he just sits bolt upright inside the scanner and loudly asks his signature question, "Where am I going?"
Docs.
Oh, wow. How did people react?
Apparently the whole room just erupted in laughter. It completely broke the tension. It's such a perfect example of his unique personality, his way of connecting, even when communication was difficult.
And sports provided moments of real triumph, too.
Huge moments, especially considering that initial prognosis that he might never walk properly. Watching him run the 50-yard dash at the Disabled Olympics held at UC Berkeley, that must have felt like such a victory.
A direct defiance of those early predictions.
Absolutely. And his determination showed up in other ways, too, like learning to swim. Apparently, he was initially terrified of water.
But he overcame it.
He did. Through sheer persistence, he taught himself how to swim. It wasn't about lessons. It was his own internal drive.
Beyond those big achievements, there were simple joys, too.
Oh, definitely. The book lists things he absolutely loved.
Right.
Pudding, cookies, any kind of snack, really.
Yeah.
Bubble baths were a favorite. Car rides, especially with music playing.
Music was important to him. Very. There's a lovely image described of him sitting in the front row of church next to his grandma Helen, just smiling and trying to sing along, moving to the hymns. And the church community embraced him completely. These simple pleasures, these connections, they were vital lifelines, not just for him, but for the whole family.
But then Chapter 9 takes a very honest, unflinching look at the toll on family members.
Oh.
How Brent's life, his needs, affected everyone else.
Yeah, it details how his journey irrevocably altered the trajectories of his parents, and especially his siblings. For Bonnie, the toll was immense emotional exhaustion, managed with that quiet strength and finding refuge in her sewing.
And the siblings. It was complex for them.
Profoundly complex, growing up in that environment, defined by Brent's unpredictable needs, the stress, the sacrifices. It shaped their adult lives in deep ways, both positive and negative.
Can you talk about Brian, the second son?
Brian's story is quite poignant. He was apparently a very gifted athlete, but injuries cut his dreams short. Later in life, he faced significant economic hardship, and sadly, he passed away in 2021.
And the father connects his struggles back to his childhood.
He reflects that Brian seemed to silently internalize a lot of the weight, the quiet frustration of growing up in a home where one child's critical needs just constantly overshadowed everything else.
What about Troy, the third child?
Troy channeled his energy differently. He got into wrestling, became highly successful professionally, a Microsoft systems engineer. Impressive achievement.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing for him either.
No. Despite his external success, the father shares that Troy battled significant mental health issues, including periods of deep despair in adulthood. Again, the father links these struggles directly back to the chronic chaos and instability of his childhood home. That early environment leaves a mark.
It really shows how childhood experiences resonate throughout life. And Victoria, the youngest.
Victoria, also an athlete, seemed to transform those early hard lessons of sacrifice and dedication. She became a devoted mother of 4, characterized by her strength and compassion. She channeled the hardship into positive action.
And the father himself, how does he describe his own burden?
He felt primarily like a caretaker and provider, often worn incredibly thin by the demands. But he explicitly credits Brent's own resilience, his persistence against all odds, as the fuel that kept him going, that gave him the perseverance to continue.
It's interesting how he looks for patterns in all this, mentioning dates and numbers.
Yes, he notes this eerie recurrence of difficult events often happening around the 28th of the month, which was the date Brent eventually died. And the number 17 apparently pops up frequently in significant family moments.
What do you make of that?
I think it speaks to that very human need to find some kind of order, some pattern or meaning when life has dealt you such random, immense challenges and losses. It's a way of trying to make sense of the overwhelming.
Which brings us to the final phase, Chapter 10. Hospice, Legacy, and Reflections. The end of Brent's life. How did the family approach hospice?
Initially, with fear, the father admits they saw hospice as basically a symbol of giving up, the final step before the end.
But that changed.
Dramatically. That fear quickly turned into profound gratitude. They realized that the hospice care Brent received was, in fact, the best, most dignified, most supportive care he had ever received in his entire life.
Better than any other facility.
By far. The stability, the expertise, the focus on comfort provided by the hospice team actually extended his life, they believe, by nearly 2 years beyond what they expected at that point.
And it changed their visits, too.
Crucially, yes. For the first time in potentially decades, the parents could finally visit Brent and just be with him. Sit with him, hold his hand, without that constant underlying tension, that bracing for the next crisis, the next phone call, the next institutional failure. It offered peace.
That's a powerful gift at the end of life.
Immense. Brent passed away peacefully on August 28, 2019. He was 57 years old, having lived decades longer than any of those initial grim medical predictions from the 1960s ever allowed for.
And the legacy he left. How does the father frame that?
Not as a tragedy. Despite all the hardship, the legacy is framed as one of love, endurance, and the invaluable lessons Brent taught the entire family.
Lessons like?
Patience, obviously. The critical importance of advocacy being the voice for someone who can't speak for themselves. Resilience, seeing his strength day after day, and finding joy in the simplest things. That was his enduring gift to them. Which leads us right into the final critical piece of the puzzle. Chapter 11. Searching for causes and understanding. Because even after 57 years, one question still lingered.
Why? Why did Brent have so many severe and seemingly unrelated birth defects right from the start?
Exactly. The doctors back in the 60s basically shrugged, attributing it to the complexity and rarity of Mosaic Down Syndrome. But the father, he never stopped searching for a more concrete answer. And the revelation he eventually uncovered years later is just shocking and heartbreaking.
What did he find?
The key, he believes, was a drug called DES, diethylstilbestrol.
DES, I've heard of that. It was given to pregnant women.
Widely. Bonnie, his mother, had been prescribed DES by her doctor back in the early 1960s after she had what they suspected was a miscarriage. This was common practice from the 1940s through the 60s.
Why was it prescribed?
It was marketed aggressively as a way to stabilize high-risk pregnancies, prevent miscarriages. Doctors assured women like Bonnie they were doing something good, something protective for their babies.
But there was a dark side to it.
A devastating one that didn't fully surface until 1971, years after Brent was born and exposed in utero. Research eventually established definitive links between DES exposure and catastrophic long-term consequences for the children.
Like what kind of consequences?
Increased rates of certain cancers, serious reproductive abnormalities, and a whole constellation of physical birth defects.
And the father saw a connection to Brent's specific issues.
He connected the dots. Brent's specific combination of problems at birth, the undescended tests, the extra fingers, the hernia, even the smaller head circumference, they all fit the known pattern of effects observed in sons who were exposed to DES while in the womb.
So the medicine meant to protect him.
Might have been the direct cause of a lifetime of physical suffering and complications. It's a horrific possibility.
The weight of that realization for Bonnie,
Yeah.
his mother, it's unimaginable.
Completely. Following her doctor's advice, believing she was doing the absolute best thing for her child, only to later suspect that the medicine itself might have been the catalyst for so much pain. That's an almost unthinkable burden for a parent to carry.
So the final lesson the book offers is really a warning.
A profound warning. Brent's life, viewed through this lens, becomes a testament to the potential dangers of untested or poorly tested medical promises. It underscores the critical, ongoing need for rigorous scientific scrutiny before treatments, especially those given during pregnancy, are rushed into widespread practice. His story is a powerful reminder of the very real human cost when that scrutiny fails.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, taking all this in? We've journeyed through this incredibly detailed account, witnessing these impossible contradictions.
Mhm.
A boy basically given a death sentence at age 2, who lives 5 decades longer than anyone thought possible.
Mm.
A family forced to completely reshape their lives, their careers, their emotional landscapes, just to navigate his needs.
Right.
And a lifetime of struggle, often driven by these very specific, almost hidden medical realities, like discovering his colon was 12 inches longer than normal, explaining decades of pain, and then the final gut-wrenching possibility of pharmaceutical failure with DES lurking in the background.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, Brent's life. Well, it wasn't defined by tragedy, was it?
Hmm.
It was the central force, the gravitational pull that determined the paths of everyone around him. His resilience, his unique personality, even his challenges. They shaped his family's careers, their emotional capacities, their deep wells of strength. His individual journey just irrevocably altered their collective legacy.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to consider. The legacy of Brent's 57 years serves as this powerful reminder, doesn't it? That our deeply personal family histories are often tangled up with these larger, unseen, sometimes systemic failures, like the uncritical, widespread use of a drug like DES back then. Brent's story really compels us, I think, to recognize the profound courage it takes not only to care for the vulnerable among us, but also to constantly critically question the medical assumptions and the institutional assurances that we rely on every single day.